Way to go, Tic Tac!
That's how you punch.
Wakanda forever!
You wouldn't have heard of me.
Let me put you on hold.
Dance off, bro! He's a friend from work!
I can do this all day.
Yeah, I know.
What up, guys? It's Dom, and welcome back to another movie review. Today we are going over and ranking Gladiator II. Gladiator II, released in 2024, directed by Ridley Scott. After his home is conquered by the tyrannical emperors who now lead Rome, Lucius is forced to enter the Colosseum and must look to his past to find strength to return the glory of Rome to its people. Now, I was very excited to see this movie. I mean, I loved the first Gladiator. It's been so long since I've watched it, and I kind of wish I refreshed my memory of it before I watched this one, but even without so, this movie was really, really good and actually definitely beat my expectations. So without further ado, let's just get right into the 10 essential aspects of a movie. The first essential aspect is plot. So even though I loved the plot of this movie and I thought it was a perfect way to continue the Gladiator story, I feel like there were some parts in it that didn't necessarily pull me out, but I feel like could have been done a little cleaner. There was a lot of parts that didn't make too much sense to me. It wasn't very large parts. It was very small scenes, but they felt unnecessary. Now, most of the movie, really good. I loved the plot. I loved the story. It flew by, even though it was 2.5 hours long. It did not feel like it because of how intrigued I was in the plot. So I can't really hate on it too much, but I do have to point out that there was a few scenes in there that were very unnecessary. The second essential aspect is attraction. Now, this is a dude's movie, so I'm sure there's a lot of women out there that went to go see this and didn't know why there was so much hype about it. But if you're a dude just that loves to see like battles, fights, war, and stuff like that in these kind of movies, you're going to love this one. I mean, if you like the first Gladiator, you're going to like this one as well. I don't really see a way, but you don't like this one. But when it came to attraction, I thought that the characters had very interesting stories and I wanted to follow along with just the action scenes were incredible. And I did not expect there to be a comedy aspect to this movie, but through Denzel Washington's character, I found myself laughing a lot. I thought that he had the perfect kind of comedy for this era of during Roman times. So I thought overall the movie was really good and I definitely was attracted. But that extra level, like I love comedy, so seeing his character have a little bit of comedy to it, not too much, but just the right amount, it was exactly what I could have dreamed. The third essential aspect is theme. I'd say the theme of this movie or the message of this movie might be legacy. Because of Lucius's situation, there was a lot of talk about that, and that is where the movie was going. So I couldn't really think of one, but if I had to come up with one, that would be the one. The fourth essential aspect is dialogue. Now, I'd say the dialogue of this movie is decent. A lot of the characters have dialogue that feels real, but it's really, that's not the point that you're focused on the whole time. But Paul Mescal's character, Lucius, he did a really, really good job with making you feel the emotion behind his dialogue. So I have to say, overall dialogue isn't too crazy or that's really worth mentioning, but his is incredible. And he was definitely, he was the star of this movie. His dialogue is really what mattered, and he absolutely nailed it without a doubt. The fifth essential aspect is acting. Now, this is similar to what I said in dialogue. Overall, the movie had decent acting. There wasn't anything that pulled me out to the point that I didn't like the acting. The two emperors, I hated them, but you were supposed to hate them. So their characters were actually made well. But when it came to Paul Mescal, who played Lucius, I loved his character. I thought, honestly, at the beginning, I wasn't sure if he was going to be the perfect choice for the movie or for this character, but the deeper into the movie we got, the more I fell in love with it. And I feel like I could not see anyone else in that role after seeing this movie. He played it perfectly. The amount of emotion he invested into this character was amazing. Because if he didn't put as much of himself into this character, it definitely wouldn't be as good, because he was by far the biggest role. And I found myself rooting for him in all of his battles and everything that he was doing in this movie. I wanted him to win it. So he did a great job of convincing me that he's the man for the job. And Denzel Washington, who played Macrinus. I couldn't read my own handwriting, I'm sorry. Macrinus. Holy crap. So Denzel Washington, who played Macrinus, his character was also really cool, and definitely I was interested in his story. But overall, he just did such a good job with the character that it felt like himself. It almost felt like it was just Denzel Washington there. And I thought that was perfect, especially for those points that I talked about in dialogue, his little comedy. Obviously the character didn't need it. None of the movie needed the comedy at all, but he kind of threw a little bit in there, which I definitely thought elevated the movie. So those two actors in particular in this movie definitely made it what it was. But everyone else, nothing to complain about. They all did a decent job. The sixth essential aspect is cinematography. Now, I think they nailed the cinematography, honestly. I mean, I was so emotionally invested in this movie. I got so many chills throughout a lot of the different sequences of dialogue along with just the scenes. I literally got chills. I got goosebumps. I thought that it was really well done. And when it came to visuals, I definitely think this movie checks that box because it looked amazing. Honestly, a lot of the scenes, it looked real. It looked like we were actually in that time period instead of where we are now. They did a really good job with that. So I think cinematography is one of the better things they did with this movie. The seventh essential aspect is editing. Now, this movie is 2 hours and 28 minutes long, and that is a long movie. A lot of the times, anything over 2 hours can feel really long. But this is one of those rare movies where I've really only seen a few that actually make this happen, but this movie flew by. I knew that it was going to be 2.5 hours going in. It did not even feel close to that. I was just so engaged with the characters and the plot that it flew by. I probably could have watched another half hour and been totally fine with it. So when it came to the pacing, they nailed it because, again, it did not feel like 2.5 hours. So I feel like the movie is exactly where it needs to be. I don't think they should have made it any shorter or any longer. This is what they were going for, and they nailed it. The eighth essential aspect is soundtrack. So overall, I think the soundtrack was good. I think it definitely fit the theme of this movie. However, I feel like the first battle, the scene during that, is where I was really, like, it's so distinct I can still remember it now. There was no, like, outside soundtrack playing, but there was music, and it was the soldiers playing the drums, so we could hear the same thing they can hear, which I thought was interesting, and I don't think that's done many times. I'm sure it's done before, but hearing a soundtrack, usually you hear, like, during a fight scene, for example, you hear some kind of music that's clearly not playing in the background. And especially if it's music that's clearly not from that time period, like you're not gonna hear rap or some crazy techno stuff in Rome times. So hearing the actual drums being played by the soldiers and knowing that they can hear the same soundtrack you are, that was a fresh change of pace, and I thought that was a really cool addition to the first fight. The ninth essential aspect is directing. So I think it's the director's job to take these previous 8 essential aspects, put them together to make a movie that's worth watching. And the director of this movie is Ridley Scott, and he has previously directed 29 movies. So stay with me here, I'm going to list them all off. They were The Duelists, Alien, Blade Runner, Legend, Someone to Watch Over Me, Black Rain, Thelma and Louise, 1492, Conquest of Paradise, White Squall, G.I. Jane, Gladiator, Hannibal, Black Hawk Down, Matchstick Men, Kingdom of Heaven, A Good Year, American Gangster, Body of Lies, Robin Hood, Prometheus, The Counselor, Exodus, Gods and Kings, The Martian, Alien Covenant, All the Money in the World, The Last Duel, House of Gucci, and Napoleon. And obviously out of 29 movies, I've seen some of them. I haven't seen a lot of them. But out of the movies I have seen, he's done really good movies in the past. And overall, obviously I know why he got the job. He directed the first Gladiator, which is why I think he was the perfect person to continue this story and know how it should look, because he did it in the first one, and it was obviously a success. So overall, did he make a movie worth watching? Absolutely. This is a really good movie. I will definitely rewatch this. At some point, I'll just want to watch the Gladiator 1 and 2 at the same time, just because that's how good the movies are. So I do have to say, he did a really good job. He was definitely the man for the job, and I'm not surprised with his resume. And the 10th essential aspect is time. Me personally, I definitely think this movie will stand the test of time. I mean, the first one has. That movie came out in 2000. And this is 24 years later, and it's a sequel that a lot of people want to see. So I definitely think it will stand the test of time. If this was a dud, it wouldn't. But because the first movie was such a success and still remembered to this day, this one just enhances that story, or this story is just enhanced by that one. So putting them together, no way this doesn't stand the test of time. Now, on to the reviews. So, Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it a 71%, Rotten Tomatoes audience gave it an 83%, and IMDb gave it a 69%. Right away, I'm agreeing with Rotten Tomatoes audience. I think it belongs slightly above. I feel like this movie has everything going for it. Just obviously those few plot issues that I mentioned at the beginning was really the one discrepancy I saw. And overall, this movie was great. I don't see any problems with it. I definitely think it belongs in the high 80s. So the closest one, definitely Rotten Tomatoes critics. I don't know what IMDb was thinking, not even giving it 70, but whatever. I definitely think that Rotten Tomatoes audience were the closest. And finally, the rankings. So, in 2024, it will be second, above Smile 2 and below The Wild Robot. Now, it's above Smile 2 simply because this movie, it has just as good acting in it, and the concept, honestly, I like a little more, and the cinematography is definitely better. Because Smile 2, it looked fine, and it was the emotion and actually being a good horror movie that got the cinematography there for me. But this one had everything. It had emotion, it had the look, and overall, it's a movie that I could rewatch plenty of times. While Smile 2, if I rewatch it, it's going to be with someone. I'm not watching that by myself. And it's below The Wild Robot because both movies were really good. I was invested in both. Honestly, I could have watched longer of both and been fine with it. I just feel like The Wild Robot has that crazy cinematography. It looks incredible, and the amount of emotions it got out of me is unmatched so far. So I have to say this one is really close. It's extremely close. I almost put it above The Wild Robot, but I just couldn't. I feel like The Wild Robot overall, especially if you're not just including me, Wild Robot reaches to a broader audience, so that's another thing. So I'd say The Wild Robot is a better movie overall, just barely. And in the 2020s, it's also going to be second, above Smile 2 and below The Wild Robot. So I'm not going to explain why again, because I just did. And in all time, it's going to be sixth, above Days of Future Past and below The Wild Robot. Now, I'm not going to explain why it's below The Wild Robot again, because I did. But it's above X Men Days of Future Past. Also a close one. Days of Future Past is one of my favorite Marvel movies in general. I just really enjoy it. I think the plot's incredible, and so is the acting. I don't know. I just feel like the overall movie of Gladiator II, the story behind it, the characters, I feel like even though I'm a big Marvel guy, I was almost more invested in Gladiator II, in the characters there, in Lucius, in Macrinus, I still can't read my handwriting, and overall in Maximus's history, and just that whole era is very interesting to me. So seeing a really good movie come out of that era is why I would put it above it. And this was hard, obviously. All of you that have watched my channel for a long time know how much of a Marvel guy I am. I have a little bit of bias. And setting that aside, there's no way I'm not going to put Gladiator 2 over Days of Future Past. That's all I have for Gladiator 2. If you guys enjoyed this review, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and make sure to comment what movie you want me to review next. If you guys like this kind of style of movie reviewing, definitely check out my best friend, Mr. Majoritarian. He has the same exact style as I do with the ranking of all-time lists and decades and year. He is the one that got me into movie reviewing. If you want to see someone with a different opinion, definitely go check him out. His link will always be in my description. And tell me what you guys thought of Gladiator 2. Did it live up to the hype? I definitely think it did. This movie beat my expectations. I definitely thought it was going to flop at least a little bit. But I'm glad it did not. So you guys let me know in the comments, and I hope you guys have an amazing night. Peace out.